Hi. Today, let's see what the closure is. By definition, a closure is a function that has access to its own scope, the scope of the outer function, and the global scope, even after the outer function has finished the execution. That means a closure is nothing but a function. A closure is a function. It is clear. A function which is defined in another function. It is a function, but a function defined inside another function. Okay, and then next, this inner function has access to its own scope. That means every function has access to its own scope and variables in that scope. It is common, and it has the access for the scope of outer function. That is, this closure function is defined inside another function, right? It has access to that outer function also, and the global scope. It is common. Global scope is accessible for all functions. Okay. When this cursor closure function has a axis, this closure function has access even after the outer function execution has been completed. That means this closure function has defined inside the another function. This outer function has been this outer function execution has been completed. Even after completion of this execution of outer function also, this closure function has access to outer function scope. That is the closure. Okay. So let's look at the JavaScript code. Okay, let's suppose if this is the function, any variable declared inside this scope. This is the scope of this function. So inside this scope, if we declare any variable, it has access. Let's suppose if we declared this function inside any another function, those variables also, that means outer function variables also, has access to this function even after outer function execution. Okay, let's see. Yeah, this is the closure function. Okay, this is the closure function. Okay, this is the closure function. This is the closure function. I have defined a function and I stored this function in closer function variable. So this closer function variable is nothing but storing the function. So this closer function inside another function called create counter. So this inside create counter, one variable called count. So this count will be accessible inside this closer function. So inside closer function, what I am doing is count plus equal to 1. That means count equal to count plus 1. And I am returning the count. And this create counter function returning the closer function. So this create counter is a function. It has one variable and it has one function variable, which means this variable contains function. And finally, it is returning the variable. This variable means inside this variable we have function. So this create counter is returning the function, which is called closer. Why this is closer? Inside this closer function, it has access to the create counter function variables. That is, count variable has access. So I am whenever I call this function, I will get this function. So here what I am doing is I am calling this function. I am calling create counter function so that I will get the this function to this counter variable. So I have defined one JavaScript method, increment and display. What I am doing is I am calling this method. What it will do? Just it will do count plus 1. Whatever count value is there, that count value will be increased by 1. And that new count value is assigning to the output text. Here I have span output. Here this initially it is 0. Whatever new count value comes in, I'm setting the text of that span to new count. And so increment and display function, what it will do is it will call the closer function, and whatever new count comes in, that text will be that count will be set as a text for the span with id output. So output will be set to that count. So let's see from the UI. So initially I have loaded the page. So if I click here count, it increased 1. Because whenever I click this button, increment and display will called. Yeah, here increment and display method will be called. So what it will do? It will call the counter. Counter means this is the closer. Now counter holds the closer method. So each and every time this count will be increased. But actually this function execution has been completed here in the line number 46 itself. Even though this create counter function execution has been completed, whenever we call this inner function, that is closer function, whenever we call, how we are calling that closer function? We are storing that closer function inside the counter. Whenever we call the counter means we are calling the closer function. So each and every time the counter value will be increased. So if I click again, previous value 1 will be stored and one value will be increased. If I click again, counter value is 3. If I click again, counter value will be 4. So the closer is a function defined inside another function, and this closure function has access to own scope, outer function scope, and global scope. Yeah when this yeah this function has its own scope, nothing special. Every function has its own scope, access to its own scope, and global scope and global scope also. Every function has access to global scope, nothing special in that also. But even after outer function execution completion also, this closure function has access to outer function variable, that is called closure.